is reality. Reality is what we believe to be true about the nature of our surroundings. But how do we come to decide that true nature? Do we conceive it completely on our own? Or do other devices gently sway our thoughts onto a pre-decided path? This is the hard question we must all ask ourselves as free humans on this planet. New sculpts your reality.
Reality. Hey guys, what's up? Wednesday night. It is that time once again.
That time, huh?
Reality Brief. Time for broadcasting live from sunny Hampton, Virginia. Not so sunny recently. What? In the super secret, undisclosed location. Glad to be with you guys tonight. We got a super special guest hailing from England. Oh, over there in what's that, the land of fish and chips?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like America's uterus.
So, I'm going to go ahead and, hey guys, say what's up to Jason Moss. Jason, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you. Thank you guys very much for inviting me on. I appreciate it. It's good to be here. It's good to talk to you.
Absolutely, man. You got a pretty amazing story there. I think what we should do probably is just start off at the beginning. How did you when was your first experience with extraterrestrials, or it's the Zetas, right?
Yeah, this goes back. I guess it's kind of like, where do the memories really begin to resurface for me in my life? Mm-hmm. I would say 2010 was really the kind of the real wake up call. The awakening is when a lot of memories began to come back and began to get very clear to me that something had happened in my past. And I began writing notes about it. I began, trying to research and find out what was going on with all this, what was happening. Because at first I didn't know what to make of this. Honestly, it was like a very unusual set of things that was going on in my past. And I had just finished a contract with a football club over here in England, and I started writing children's books. I got into doing some of that. This was all I was going to do with my life. I was going in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Honest work.
And be it, yeah, I mean, just a children's author and fairy tale author, that kind of thing. And it was like late August. There was something happened in the neighborhood in the house I used to live in. There was something, I don't know what it was, pulsed the neighborhood. And all of a sudden, all the car alarms went off, the power went out, we had a power outage. And within about a few days of this, I began to get these resurfaced memories of extraordinary events in my past. It was like some kind of I would describe an electromagnetic pulse hit the neighborhood. The memories at first, well, they were, I was meeting military people in my past. It's hard to explain, really, when you start getting when you have something like amnesia, or you start getting resurfaced memories. It's a memory. You don't have any doubt of that.
Mm-hmm.
And what got me at first was, it was like, wait a minute, I remember this. I remember these events, and I remember it was like early 1990s. Something had happened with something involving a military abduction of some kind in front of my home in Texas, in Azle, Texas, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what was going on. And then in the memories, as they began to unfold, there was a girl in the middle of this somewhere, and she was about 4.5 feet tall, long hair, and what started kind of freaking me out is that I began to remember that she had larger than normal eyes. And I was remembering meeting her physically, and they had brought her to me, that they had her in captivity and they brought her to me. I was very helpless in the experience. I was not actively able to change the outcome or do anything to what was happening. I was being forced into this, and I was being made to watch this, and she was allowed to interact with me. And I just come through a divorce. I had 4 sons. They were all very young. And here in England, it's not something you go around and broadcast and say, hey, everybody, this is what, hey, what's going on? So I had to be very responsible about this in the beginning. This was something very serious. And as the memories unfolded further, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to turn to. You go to the internet, you start looking things up and try to research anything similar to that. I was getting ready to walk away from this subject about a week after the memories began to come back, when I felt called to go out in my backyard. I know that sounds a bit corny or cringy to some folks, but I was getting ready to literally walk away from this, for a lot of different reasons. And all the way through this, I felt this unusual kind of sense of love pushing through inside me from some source, from somewhere. And I went in the backyard one night, I looked up in the sky, and I saw a white object moving across the sky overhead, directly over my house. And it was moving, it was low, and it was moving very silently. It wasn't pulsating or blinking or anything like that. And then all of a sudden, right next to it, a second one appeared, as if someone turned on a light. And then I observed the two objects then fly silently over the house, very, very quietly, until they flew out a distance. I didn't take that as any kind of coincidence. I took it as something like a reunion was going on, that somebody was sending a message. This is a reunion. That the girl in the memories was, in fact, alive and well, and that she was perhaps in some ways responsible for the fact these memories were now awakening. And it began from there. It was like this was the beginning of something that was going to be changing my life forever at this point. And it's been the road down I've been traveling has been unbelievable, unusual, and at times just really literally out of this world. And it's just, I don't know, been pretty incredible.
Yeah, I'd say. So, what can you tell me about your interactions with this being? Was it verbal communication? Was it telepathic communication? Was there physical contact?
Well, the memories began to... We go back to the memories of the early 90s. As they began to open up in me, I felt this was also not just a past memory, but this was also something happening in the present time, ongoing. And it's really kind of hard to describe something like that, what that means. It's something I think you have to kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
It begins with a communication where I'm sitting in my house in Texas, and there's a phone call that goes off. And my mother at the time said, "There's a girl on the phone for you." I got on the phone as I was beginning to recall this, and she was, just someone, I didn't know who she was. She was telling me extraordinary things. She was telling me that she was in captivity of, I think she was saying military intelligence or Air Force intelligence, something like that. And she said this was a very serious set of circumstances that were going on. Something, she said, very serious was happening. And the next few days was going to be very difficult for the both of us. We sat on the phone for a few hours. Now, I understand they don't know that she was able to communicate with me that way and contact me.
Mm-hmm.
How she was able to utilize a telephone, I don't know.
Did
now,
you? Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to break your train of thought there. But was there the phone call? Was there any type of interference, or was it just crystal clear voice?
Yeah, it's interesting. That she did sound as if she would fade in and out in the phone call. I'm not really. I've researched that since. I don't know if perhaps she was using some. I know how this is going to sound, some form of thought projection into our technology to able to make that call like that. I don't know. Now, at the time these memories were resurfacing, I had never heard of. There's an experiencer out there. I've come to know that family online and Facebook, Lisa and Stan Romanek. I'd never heard of Stan's case. I had never heard that he had said he had received a phone call from an extraterrestrial human hybrid girl. I didn't know about his case. So I was actually it would be a little bit later on in the next few years before I would find out about that and find out that he had a similar experience. And here I was getting this memory, and she, as she was communicating with me on the telephone, at first I thought it was a prank call. I didn't think it was very real. I thought, because I knew some girls at the time, some friends in Arlington, Texas. I knew that they were good friends in Arlington, Texas. They sometimes like to pull my leg, and I thought maybe they had a friend that they'd put up to do this. But the girl began to describe very intricate details of my bedroom, of my private life, and then she says, "How do you think I got your number to call you?" And she begins to tell me about telepathy, that this was some kind of a telepathic communication, that she was awakening memories within me. Then she began to speak about the future, that 18 years hence, that I would be doing what was happening to me in 2010, which is having this recall. And she said this was all very, very serious. She said that I would go through a period in my life where I wouldn't be remembering anything. She said that I had been an experiencer my entire life, that she had been interacting with me since, early on, that I had been dealing with them since the 1970s, because I'm 45 now, and so back, that I was growing up with experiences that I was unaware of. She had spoke about a faction of the extraterrestrial human or the hybrids, or a race that she was calling themselves the Sasani. She said she spoke a lot of things. She talked about there was a man who was channeling one of the members of her civilization at that time, who was speaking to the world on behalf of them. Now, she didn't mention the name. I don't know if our listeners are familiar with Daryl Anko channels Bashar or not. But I took it to I don't have that memory of her saying those specific names, but I think she was implying, because I know Daryl Anka at the time was channeling Bashar in the early 90s. I don't, like I said, I can't say that she said Bashar or Daryl Anka, but I mean, I take it to mean she was making inferences to that gentleman and Bashar.
Now, are the Sasani and the Zetas one and the same, or are they two distinctly different groups of entities?
They're very different. The Sasani are what are classed as the extraterrestrial human hybrids. They're the product of the abduction program, where the Zetas have, if I'll take our callers to that just for a minute, where they've taken something out of a human being's DNA, their eggs or whatnot, and then put their own DNA and created a whole new race have emerged from this.
Are we talking about Zetas as in Zeta Reticuli?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Cool.
So, I mean, she spoke about the program, that they don't make apologies for who they are, that she didn't really talk a lot about, that they really condone the fact people were being abducted and traumatized like that, but they were here. As the call continued, I was getting very uncomfortable at some point. I was now believing what I was hearing, but I was feeling a loving connection with her, which was helping me through this. And at the time, I had grown up a Baptist. I had gone to church, and I had family members who were Jehovah's Witnesses. And so for some reason, I was 20 years old. I was trying to, interject my own ideas and thoughts. I'm like, where does God and Jesus play a part in all this? And she's like, I won't play. I don't remember the exact wording, but she was like, I'm not going to be adding to your or taking away from your belief system. She says, this isn't about any kind of a belief system. She says, I am what I am. She says, you either accept that or you don't. And then if I didn't, she was going to end that communication with me there and then. But she said it was very serious what was going on. It was like life and death. And I said, no, let's continue. Let's continue. So we continued on that conversation. As I recall, it went on for ages, and she just gave me a lot of information of what was happening and why this was happening. There was talk about the future, 700 years into the future. She said all the hybrids that have ever been made or ever created at that time were made, but they were being taken back somewhere in the future, something like the 26th, 27th century.
It's a long way
where
off.
humans and hybrids were coexisting together on Earth at that time. And they had been here before. This wasn't the first time this had happened. Like the 20th century wasn't the first time this had happened. This had happened in human history before, long into history. She spoke about a history that went back even much further into ancient history, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of years ago on Earth,
further back
in the
than
solar
the Zetas
system.
What was that?
Further back than the like the Vedas, for instance.
I'm sorry, say what?
Further back than the Vedic text, the ancient Vedic text,
the Hindu texts that talk about Vishnu and
way
all
back
that fun stuff.
This was a history she'd spoke about, like something like a first Earth age or something, where humanoids or human-like people had lived on Earth. It was unbelievable. It was like even before the time of the dinosaurs. It was way back. There was a civilization on what we know as Mars,
right,
that had existed at that time. And this civilization was very much like what she was now, or what she is now. They had been wiped out by some other civilization that had destroyed them and destroyed their world. This also caused a great deal of destruction here on that early Earth. When this destruction hit the solar system, that brought life into extinction on one world, but not entirely on the Earth. And this was like, it had taken millions of years for this to come back around again. Everything had come full circle. And the time scale involved here was quite staggering and unbelievable. But then she's going on to telling me about a much older civilization, which I think many of our listeners might be familiar with, the mantids, or the Mantis race. The ancients, they go back before the Zetas, being like the oldest civilization in the galaxy. And they were actually the progenitors of the Zetas and many other civilizations like them.
What stands to reason that there'd be civilizations out there that could have, a couple billion years head start on us?
Yeah. We start putting in those time scales like that, it all starts to fall into place. The Earth itself, as many may or may not be aware of, is over 4 billion years old. And even in recent times in science, they're beginning to discover that perhaps there was a lot more life on Earth much further back in history than what had been previously thought in our current understanding of it. And even in recent, and of course, there's NASA's coming up with all these pictures on Mars of what look like ancient ruins of something up there. It was quite incredible stuff, and I mean, there was lots of questions pop into my head. I was like, well, why do you exist? What are you? And she was going on about higher dimensions, about the bodies being used as containers of souls. That they're more like interdimensional travelers more than anything, not just within the galaxy, but going higher up into dimensions, 5th, 6th, 7th dimension. She spoke of the 7th dimension as something that they went to routinely, that they were caretakers of higher realities, things like that. But they had to have some connection to this reality, so there was some need to interbreed with the human race. Now, the human race she spoke of as being themselves hybrids, and having been created by these older races and put here on this planet. And I thought, well, why take so long? This is thousands. The human race has been here tens of thousands of years, and she was talking about
so long is subjective, huh?
Well, yeah. I mean, she said civilizations need history to identify who they are. That there's a need for a civilization to have a sense of self, a sense of identity. So you have to have a long history. You have to have, you can't just pop into being and there you are. She said that while they have higher advanced brains and minds and telepathy, she said the human race had one advantage on them, is that we have an emotional development which was actually more advanced than theirs, because we've been around such a long time as a civilization or a race. it was quite incredible. It was quite a lot of, really deep subject matter running across. Now, for a young guy, I like to try to interject a bit of humor. To try to break the ice a bit. So I was like kind of interjecting things. I was like referring to the Zetas as little gray dudes, and she kind of thought that was a bit humorous, the little gray dudes. And so I was like, wow, I was like, I didn't know what to think of all this. And
those are
there
just
was a
the
lot
drones,
more
though,
subject
right?
matter. Go ahead.
The little gray guys are just the drones, though, right? The real
Pretty
Zetas
much.
themselves are taller and ganglier.
Yeah, we're talking about mantids at that point, the Mantis race, which are, I guess, could be described as arthropodic, just an insect race that had evolved in some other world that may or may not exist at this point, may be gone by now. The Earth itself, even in astronomy, will show you, had at one time been a part of the Zeta Sagittarii constellation 1.8 million, 2 million years ago. And I mean, how close to it? Well, apparently it was only a 1 light year away from that system. So at one point you probably could have walked outside 2 million years ago and read a newspaper under its own stars. The Earth was that close to it. And during that time period, as we know with human evolution, there was a sudden jump, or something changed within early human species, and then thus the human race began to rise up. Now we're 39 light years from Zeta Reticuli. So I just want to interject that to the callers, not just say, here's my experience, but to throw a bit of science and a bit of other validations to that. Early experiences in the 1960s, people that were put under hypnosis who had claimed to have been abducted by beings drew a star map that was the Zeta Reticuli star system. And these beings were saying that they were from that star system. So there's a lot of different validations to tie that in with the claim that the human race is in fact a hybrid race itself.
Well, and everything in the galaxy is constantly in motion too. That's we don't live in a static galaxy. All the stars are moving at different speeds and slightly different directions.
Now, let me see if my memory fails me or not. Are you familiar with the Benny and Betty and Barney Hill case?
I am, yes, absolutely.
Didn't they get a star map to Zeta too?
That's right. Yeah, I'm making references to that. It's just one of many. There's so many validations around this. Now you get the skeptics out there, of course, and I understand. But this is also the audience I'm speaking to, is to say, while what I'm going to be saying is going to sound quite extraordinary, understand, of course, that mainstream media is not going to touch this. Mainstream scientists are getting their funding from the government, and they're being told, ignore this. There's going to be a lot of people who may take it as just a lot of crazy stuff or whatever, and just try to say, look, I didn't hear about this over here, or I didn't hear about it there, so I can't. I'm bringing this out to the public for several reasons. It's not to promote me, it's because it was something I was instructed to do, and also there may be others with similar experiences, as to help make some validations to them, so that they don't feel alone in what's happening. It's also to kind of help with the understanding of what's happening around them. I don't want to in any way want to be any kind of a come off as sounding like a know-all or a guru or a follow me, get on my wall. I'm the only one that knows. We're all in this. There's a lot of people that are in on this, that are a part of this. But there are contingencies in place by certain governments to say, we really can't have people like Jason Moss getting away with something like this. He can't be saying that. There's a lot of reason for a cover-up. It's to say nothing of the fact that it might make some people uncomfortable. There's institutions out there, both economic, religious, and otherwise, that would stand to lose a great deal on such disclosures. But
absolutely,
Yeah, there's nothing in this that in any way suggests fear or the whole notion of alien invasion is just Hollywood. It's just ridiculous. It's absolute nonsense. I know I've got to say a name here, and I respect his work, Dr. David Jacobs. He's a longtime 40-something year veteran researcher, UFO researcher. I respect his work, but although regressed many people, he's come to the opinions that this is some kind of a hostile thing, that it's not a good thing. Human race is under some kind of an attack, or that these hybrids are going to supplant us and take over.
It does kind of seem like they're geoengineering the Earth via various means and measures.
Yeah, I mean it's not any kind of nothing I've ever seen or ever heard or ever experienced ever suggested any kind of a takeover of any kind. Mm-hmm. There is, however, what needs to be said is a flashpoint going on with the human race. There is a danger going on, yes. Many of the hybrids, I think many experiencers have dealt with, have probably given off something very gloomy or perhaps rather frightening or unsettling to the experiencers because of the fact they have telepathy. When you get involved with beings of telepathy, you're feeling pretty much everything they feel. So I think that they may have a rather pessimistic feel to some people when they get around them. Another thing that has to be dismissed. Go ahead.
Oh, we'll get along just fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I let me ask you this real quick before you move on. Do you feel like there's no like malevolent ETs that could be threatening the planet, or are you just saying that these particular species that you're in contact with definitely has no ill will?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's right. By contrast, yeah, the ones I'm dealing with are kind and mean no harm to anybody. They're very harmless, very harmless. In fact, they don't, as far as I know, have any offensive capabilities of any kind for anybody out there of any military issue that might be listening, who are taking what I'm saying to heart. There's nothing threatening from their technology. However, I am under the impression that there are civilizations that are engaging this planet that are a bit of an issue, a bit of a threat. But I don't want to dwell on that.
No, I'm not trying to bring it there. I just wanted to clarify that point.
You're okay. Now there has been a lot of talk about reptilian contactees or reptilian civilizations, things like this. But before we head into that, we have to talk about contracts. There's an issue of contracts, of not just on Earth, secrecy contracts signed between governments on Earth and these civilizations, but contracts, galactic contracts with civilizations that have made agreements before they come to this planet. And that depends on the civilization's level of technological advancement. So we have like a civilization that can take many years to arrive to get to the Earth, have a lower degree of technology.
Are you familiar with the Kardashev scale, Jason?
I'm sorry?
Are you familiar with the Kardashev scale?
I am, yeah. Like a class 1 civilization, class 2, class 3.
And we're basically like class or type 0.3 maybe on that scale.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, the ones with the lower technology take a great deal of resources to arrive to the Earth are usually reptilian civilizations. And one of the reasons for that is their DNA can't withstand faster than light or light speed travel. Now, some may say traveling at the speed of light can't be possible in physics, as far as what physicists would say.
Well, you just warp space.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of technologies or fields that can be applied to a physical craft or person or being within a craft to prevent it from being destroyed and torn to pieces by such fantastic speeds. But the DNA of reptilians cannot withstand that. So what they have to do is interbreed with and hybrid up with human DNA, which can withstand such fantastic speeds and velocities through the galaxy. So that there are different kinds of hybrids, I have to say to our listeners. There are different kinds of reasons for hybridization programs ongoing. So their contracts of secrecy are going to be based upon their moral beliefs that we can't be dealing with. We can't have our people come to this planet and make mass contact, because it wouldn't be fair to the ones from their home world, because it took them many years to get to Earth. Then we have a much more advanced civilizations which get here very quickly, very rapidly. Their contracts are peaceful. They're going to be dealing with large governments in this planet. They're going to be saying, look, this is a program we're going to kick off and it's going to start. But those treaties, some signed with the American government in the 1950s, stipulated, as far as I was told, that they would be taking people peacefully. They wouldn't be remembering anything, but only if the American government and other governments agreed within the contract that they would not violate those parts of the contract, such as, i.e., for one, they know about the nuclear program on Earth. They know about the ICBMs, the arsenal the human race has. If there's an escalation of an arms race, for example, then that's a violation of the contract. So then then we can then break this end of the contract and start making more open contact with everyday people on Earth. Mm-hmm. So over time, there's been a more opening of the door as it goes along, because the contracts originally signed are being violated by human governments on this planet. So they're gradually opening that door little by little. Mm-hmm. Now, if there's a full-out nuclear war of any kind, which brings us to the North Korean crisis of recent days and weeks, where we've got President Trump and his dialogue, and the thing about North Korea is coming fourfold. It's coming right up on the center stage. If there is an exchange of any kind like that, then that's where the contract is completely null and void. At this point, there it is. It's all fair, open game. There'll be a lot of contact going on for the survivors of this on Earth. It's going to be not an end of the human civilization, but a fracturing of it. There'll be enough of a civilization. You'll have a grocery store, a Disneyland, but it'll be a very different world we'll wake up into after a small nuclear war with North Korea. And a fractured civilization is the end of one civilization and the beginning of another. The dawn of that civilization here on Earth will be the revelation, a disclosure before all the human race that this has been ongoing, that they are here. Now, we get into the Solar Wardens, which is a name in the media. Many have heard Gary McKinnon was a British guy who hacked into naval computers and started looking into this program.
I've never heard that name used as a plural.
All right, okay.
Right, one of the interesting things, Jason, is that before we get into it, I've talked to several people who claim to be inside of different secret space programs, do different experiences. I don't know if you ever heard of the 20 and back thing. It's supposed to be related to Solar Warden, but as far as I can tell, no one ever actually remembered the U.S. Navy program being called Solar Warden.
Well, I heard it was Air Force. For one thing, it wasn't Navy. It was.
Well, there's two of them.
Oh, gotcha. Mm-hmm.
According to the narrative.
I remember ship names. I remember hearing the ship names: USS Hillenketter, Aaron Burr, and then there was another one.
But what I'm getting at is, I'm just wondering is if maybe that what McKinnon found actually has to do with what you're talking about, and not the Navy secret space program.
I haven't seen what McKinnon found. I haven't really.
I don't think anybody has.
Too much,
it's just
online
pretty much. Yeah, it's pretty much just what he said. I mean, he doesn't have any hard evidence to back it up. It's just going on his word, essentially. Which I guess I really don't have any. Go ahead.
Well, with the information, it's kind of hard to read that in. How to all I can do is put out what I was given or what I was told,
right,
and then take it from there. We go back again, experiences, 1970s. My mother and myself, I was remembering being taken We had some other unpleasant, hostile experiences in our abduction experiences in Texas. Waking up on craft with beings that were rather frightening. And then one day, it seems that there was this experience, and I remember being in my childhood where we were on just taken on a craft, and there were these Zeta human hybrid people or Sasani people who were very friendly, very nice, and they said, "You're not in any danger. We're part of a special program, a guardian or caretaker program," as they were describing to me, where we've decided to break free from what the general agenda, which was that once these hybrids were made, they wouldn't be here. There's a faction of them that broke away from that and said that they love mankind and the human race and feel that this is family on Earth, that they see themselves as being human, though no one on Earth would probably call them human, and that they wanted to protect and help the human race in its development to the point where when contact was going to be made, disclosure, that they would be a part of that. That there wasn't probably going to be initially any disclosure in the beginning. There wasn't going to be anything. But as the contracts are being broken along the way and being fractured and the human race is developing, they were going to be coming out more and more. So they become more of what we're seeing in the UFOs in the skies as time increases. Then they said that he didn't have to be in the craft. They wanted to drop us. If we wanted to go, we would go. But they were very kind. They also said your experiences with the others, the regressive beings, have ended. We've ended. They're not going to harm you or take you anymore. Mm-hmm. So they're in direct revolt against this hostile force of abduction and regressive being. They're coming in to put a stop to that and also help mankind along the way, protect mankind from hostile civilizations that may be coming here.
So, and this is the hybrid race.
I'm sorry?
This is the hybrid race, and you're breaking up a little bit, so if out there listening, sorry, be patient. We're connecting over long, vast distances.
Yes.
But, yeah, so you were saying this is the hybrid race you're talking about that is doing the protection thing.
This is funny. Yes.
Okay.
And in that time frame, in the late 70s, I want to also point out a correlation and a validation to that. As I understand, our channeler, Channel Shar, was having his UFO encounters at that time, and it began for him. You know, he began having his experiences. If I can just if I may draw a correlation to him. And so it's been a slow process. Now, whether or not Mr. McKinnon got into some intelligence file that he across several different kinds of files, I haven't seen what he's looked at. I don't know what he's looking at. I never got the impression that it was any kind of a human space fleet or anything human beings had constructed, that this wasn't the case. But I had the impression fully that this was human beings were working with them aboard their craft. Mm-hmm. I never got anything that suggested a military, that the military on Earth had built something and put something into space. It can't be ruled out. If I say completely no, there's a tendency to get called disinformer, so I don't want to say that to our listeners. It's leave it open. It's, I guess anything's possible. They built those craft, they built them. I mean, I can only tell you what I was given, what I'm told.
Right.
Be kind of like an Earth. Here's where things sound a little space cadet-y. I have to laugh at myself sometimes because I know how this is going to sound. My part in this is kind of like an earthbound.
Jason, you there?
You there, Jason?
I think we lost you, man.
I said.
Oh, there he is.
All right.
Yeah, you're breaking up. You're getting correctly.
Can you close some of those windows, man?
Yeah, let's see.
That's what are called change.
All right. Jason, you're going to be upset.
Hello? Are you there? Hello?
Yeah, can you hear us?
We're here. But we didn't get anything you just said.
Okay.
Okay, so
that's okay.
and the last thing you said was I'm trying to remember now. Oh my god, I got the worst memory. I would never be able to recall an alien abduction. What they called you. You were talking about what they called you, right?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Where I got left off at, where y'all didn't hear me. I'll just recap what I just said on that point. That I can't say what Gary McKinnon saw or didn't see. I don't want to say that the human civilization in America has not built space fleets. I can't say that because one can be called a disinformer. I don't want to say that. Let's leave that open.
But that might
I can only report. I'm sorry.
But that just because that just wasn't part of your experience. Is what you're saying.
I didn't hear you do what?
He was just saying that that's just part of your experience, that you didn't, see anything like that, or, in your experience.
Yeah. Well, my part in this is I'm an earthbound contingent to this program of the Sasani and what they're doing in helping people. It's, I know it sounds a bit.
It sounds a bit.
Because I know when I start saying things like that can, it's. So I tend to kind of think, well, okay, here it is. You just sometimes you'd have to just come out and say something. You can't beat around the bush about it. You say, all right, here it is. I do. I would call it channeling this being that I met. Now, that's the only way to describe this is channeling. Now, this is a very intimate contact with her. In the early 90s, in that phone conversation, she had told me that it was very important that we connect very, very intimately, and I didn't have to do it. It was up to me, and I felt a loving connection with her. So she melded with my soul. The best way to describe it, it's something like a marriage of two souls becoming one soul. It's very deep stuff, and she said that now we're in two different containers, but we're of the same soul. We're of the same energy. Okay, two different consciousness, but one soul. If that makes any sense. And so she said that we're quantumly fused as one energy. And she said that was the only way we were going to survive what was coming next. And so about a few days later, in my mother's front yard, it's nighttime. A whole about 8 or 9 of these Range Rover cars drove into the courtyard, tent glass, black vehicles. Soldiers got out. They surrounded the property. I thought, what the hell is going on here? It was really scary. And there was a woman that got out, a blonde woman, a soldier. I believe she was something like a staff sergeant, and she said, I'm not answering any questions, just, she stood by it was a 3-foot chain link fence around my mother's property. She said, if you want any questions answered or anything, you have to step off the property and stand next to me. She was very controlling. I stood next to her. They chaperoned this whole event. All of a sudden, this door opened of one of the vehicles, and this small girl gets out and began to look at me. At first cursory glance, it's looking at like a child or something like a Muppet. It was hard to describe because when she moved and walked, she didn't have any bit of a human physiology. So at first I thought this was some kind of a puppet I was looking at, and I was like, oh, how do you do that? I thought, how do you do that? Wow. But then she looked at me, and I began to realize that's the one I was on the phone with. And then she came to me and stood in front of me. At this point, I was feeling everything she felt. I knew everything was in her head. Because we were already melded as one in this one soul connection. We were both sharing each other in the instant to instant, second by second. I was able to I wasn't feeling the trauma or the shock of having 30 or 40 soldiers of whatever unit they were in, I don't know, surround my property and putting guns at my head at this point. I was not feeling the shock as much, you know, from this experience of seeing her. But everything in that moment, it was hitting me when I saw her face to face. Everything was hitting me. Everything I'd ever seen. There was Oprah Winfrey was out at the time talking about this subject, and I thought, these people are crazy. You know, what are you on about? You know, aliens. In that instant, I know this was very real. They are very real. And she was right there in front of me. And then I got to hold her. She held me. I touched her. This was something that they didn't really understand why we were connecting like that. So I understood that they didn't know that she'd already contacted me prior to that night. So she got the jump on them, is what she did. She's saying to me, I won't be used as a terror weapon or a means of frightening you, is what she was telling me in that phone call. She said they're going to try to use me as a way to frighten you. I don't entirely know the purpose of why they brought her to me. You know, it wasn't something other than the fact that she understood at that level that they were going to be using her as some means of again to frighten me or to upset me. I don't know, to maybe test my reaction to meeting someone like her. I don't know. What followed next was very upsetting, very terribly upsetting. They pulled her from me. Immediately, they were very hostile with her. They grabbed her hair. They began to hit her. I began to shake uncontrollably, began to cry. I was saying, don't hurt her. She's a person. She has feelings. Even now, as I go back to that, I get kind of emotional. And one of these soldiers was very hostile with me, sarcastic. I won't swear on radio here, but he started to say, what are you, some kind of a freak? He says, is this your effing girlfriend? Is this your effing girlfriend? He says, what are you, some kind of a freak? The blonde soldier was compassionate about that, and she didn't like what they were doing. She had tears in her eyes, but couldn't really stop what they were doing. She can't stop this. But she was there as kind of like my chaperone. And she was a tall lady, rather kind of a stocky built woman is what she was. And she starts to tell them, don't be that way with this girl, or don't, you know, stop doing that. There was some kind of commander there, a colonel or somebody, major or someone, I'm not sure, some kind of officer, and he's asking her, Sergeant, what's going on? And she says, well, sir, he's under some kind of alien hypnosis or mind control. Again, some of this is a bit fragmented of what's going on at this point in that night, meeting her face to face. And I don't remember how that night ended. All I know is it ended. And they wanted total control over this. They were very aggravated that I had any contact with her, even probably prior to her calling me. It's as if they knew I was a contactee and I didn't know that. There was maybe some means of trying to subvert that contact. I then witnessed some kind of device was put to the hybrid girl's head, and they said, we can control this experience. One of them told me we can turn it on and off. And then they tased her. It's like a stun gun. She goes limp. She goes down. Again, I felt like it was like getting a shot. I could feel what she was feeling. I felt like a shotgun going through my head in that instant. And I mean, I felt like I just died. I felt like I was dying. I couldn't stop crying. I couldn't. All I know is she's as much a person to me as anybody on Earth. She's not any kind of an alien or anything like that. She's a person, a flesh and blood person. And I could feel her fear. I could feel it instant to instant, you know, what was happening to her. It was very, very traumatic experience. But she said that part of the reason for our melding the souls and all this was so even after... and I was crying, why are you doing this to her? And then they were like, well, when they get her back, I guess presumably Zetas, that they're going to, her memories will be altered. It's going to look like I hurt her, or they were trying to convince her I had done this to her or something. So she had ingeniously melded the soul, made the contact with me prior to that night. She was psychic as well as telepathic, and so she's thinking ahead of them all the way through. She got the jump on them. So this military abduction ends with her getting the upper hand on this, is what happens in that sense. So I don't have any memory of it after this, years go by. And there it was. 2010, it began to come back to me. Now, I do want to mention one name here for our listeners. There was a man who helped me quite a bit the last few years. He's a researcher. He's been in the UFO community for a long time. He's been a friend on Facebook, David Chase, Chace, David Chase. He's a good guy. He's a researcher. He draws the aliens for people. He's an artist. He was helping me along with, getting it out, of me. So don't edit this, because people tend to edit the shocking stuff, or they tend to try to say, well, that didn't happen. He has a degree from UCLA. He studies human behavior. So he was very helpful in a lot of. So it's not just that she was helping the memories come back from out there, but we have an earthbound contingent here, people like David. So David, if you're listening, thank you. It's been a journey, up and downhill. There's been trust issues with people online. I've had those issues because I've been identified as having a bit of a post-traumatic stress from that experience that night that I kept reliving over and over again. I kept seeing her getting hurt. I kept feeling it. I kept, and I was like, but I also feel the love coming from her in the present sense from out there. I've had people ask me, well, if you have that kind of contact, that's quite extraordinary. Let's see some evidence to back it up. Can we do something like a carnival act? What can you pull out of a hat, Jason?
You ever seen Beetlejuice? You remember when they were doing the thing with the shrimps? Can you do that?
The seance?
Yes. I remember that.
Yeah. Can we get some of that action going on? And I went ahead and I pulled up some of your friend's artwork there. Looks like a lot of reptilian and also mantid beings. There, I see some grays. Yeah. So you guys out there, you can check that out. It's pretty interesting. Good work.
Yeah, he's a good guy. If anybody can try to find him on Facebook or check him out, he's been around for a long, long time. Had a lot of experience with a lot of us. So I mean, he's got a lot of people that want to talk to him. We don't have a lot of veteran researchers left in the field. Sadly, we've had a lot of them kind of pass on or die or just fade from it. But yeah, I mean, along the last years, I got called into different areas in this, and I was at one point where I was bottoming out of this. I was like sharing some pretty extraordinary stuff, and I got called in, and people says, well, let's see some extraordinary evidence. And I says, well, all right. So this is going to sound a bit corny, but I thought project to this being. By the way, she told me to call her Benita, which she said that's not her name, but that's a name that I can identify her by, because they don't use language. They use telepathy and energy signatures. So she said Benita was the name. That's BENICO. And I says, okay. So I called out to her, and what I started getting was I was getting to the forest near my home here in England. Now, there have been some UFO sightings in the Ipswich town area, and I have these photographs. I went into the forest with infrared technology and began taking pictures. Now, I have given some of those pictures to you, Don.
I got them up on the screen right now. I'm going to go through them as you talk about it.
Yeah, and there it was. I was getting entities coming up in the pictures, which they don't look. Now, some of these aren't clear, I admit.
And it's going to translate bad through the stream too. So what? If you don't mind, I could just post them up on Facebook. Later tonight or.
Yeah. I'm happy to send more. I have a lot more of those, by the way. And that was taken in one particular woodland near my home, where there was a cell phone tower nearby that woodland location. They didn't seem to be anywhere else. They were just near that cell phone tower. That's open into interpretation on that one. There's someone said a portal gate. I felt there's a gate there, that they're using the energy of that cell phone tower as a gate. Now, I'm I'm an experiencer, but I'm one of those kind of people that like to back it up with something before I say that. So I get a picture of something that looks like a gate, I'll give it to you. But I mean, I don't doubt what I feel, but I tend to like to kind of back up what I say. So they started giving me not just pictures of like craft in the sky, but this was now meeting in the woods. And my sons and I began to have experiences at night where we were seeing them face to face. Some of those pictures came up infrared, because you can't really, to get a picture at night, you have to have some means of getting that. So we have some of that backed up in documentation with photography. Again, I don't have the best that money can buy with photography. You use what you got. You try to get what you have. And over time, over a few years, I began to acquire a great deal of these, what people call entity pictures. They don't look like deceased humans in the photos or ghost pictures. They have a familiar, large almond eye, large head shape to them. They look like large mantises or praying mantises of about 6 or 7 feet tall. Some look quite short, very small, large round heads, very beetle-like eyes. What was interesting was a lot of them looked like the aliens a captain from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base had described seeing in person, that they had taken into custody or had below ground in the base. That was an interesting validation. I was actually in possession of these pictures of entities in the force that are identical to what he was describing that Wright-Patterson alleges to have. That was interesting. So I mean, all these pictures were coming up, entity pictures. I kept going back, kept getting called back to the forest, and began posting these pictures and saying that this is a gift. These are gifts. This is their way of saying it's a calling card. This man is talking to us, is what they're saying. This is the best way they can do that, using the technology I have. But then you get people that say, we want to see more. Can you have Benita stand with you in a photo and put your arm around her? It was
the
like
shrimp, the shrimp. Give them a shrimp party. They'll shut up.
She'll be on the back of my bike. We'll be down there at Vegas and Tahoe on the 17th. No. I mean, we start going back to the contracts again, and the safety issues. Now, this woodland in England has been buzzed many times by Apache helicopters, black helicopters. Soldiers have been seen running in and out of that forest down there quite a bit over the years. It's a hot spot of activity. It's almost like a second Rendlesham is unfolding there. I haven't given away the exact location for different reasons. I will do that with you guys. I will say that to the listeners for the first time. I will be giving that away. What I'll do is I'll send you a map. It would be the best way to do it. You can post it to your wall. Awesome. I don't live in that location now. I've moved 14 miles away to a town called Felixstowe. I haven't been there in a few months. But there have been UFO sightings down here. It's kind of as though to say, yeah, we're still here. I have not been called to any local location down here, but I think the message was given that this guy is talking to us. I think is what that means. I don't think that there's going to be a need. I mean, how many pictures do people need? I mean, for science, you have to duplicate it 2 or 3 times before they are satisfied the method has been followed. And the pictures are there. People can look at them. They can take it through all the software they want to. They're genuine. My sons were there. They witnessed when we went down in the woods.
So you actually did see these things in person before you took the picture?
Some of them, yes. Some of them, no. So a lot of them they were not seen by the naked eye, but they were there. Now that validates some UFO researchers like Timothy Good in his books on UFO research, where military personnel were saying that they could render themselves invisible. Again, I didn't know about that at the time the pictures were taken, that this was the case. I didn't know. I knew they were in the woodland. I knew to be taking the pictures in those locations, but I didn't know anything could have come up in that photo at that point. I followed what I felt, and anything could have appeared, anything. And there these mantids were. Some experiences, it was with you could see daylight right there in daylight in the woodland. A 7-foot something like a mantis was appearing in front of me and turning its head sideways the way mantids do, kind of like it was looking at me. My head felt quite buzzed, quite hummed, as if it was humming. I'll be honest with you guys. This is not like I'm some brave hero. I don't like to say fear, but yes, I got shaky in the knees.
I mean, it sounds like scary stuff.
Yeah, man. I can't say how I would respond to something like that.
For the faint of heart.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I don't. On Facebook, I put on a brave face, but I get wrapped on the head by some people. Don't put fear out there, Jason. I'm like, well, I can't say it's fear, but I have to say it's a bit of anxiety.
Yeah, just a bit. I would imagine
it would blow your mind at the very least.
Did you ever have any? Did you ever have any contact with these outside of taking pictures of these mantid beings?
Yeah, we'll get into what Jason Hawes from Ghost Hunters International calls. I love that show. He's really good about how he categorizes personal experiences. I don't know Jason Hawes, but he says personal experiences. Now that's something that, as I'll use their definition, if that's okay, it can't be quantified. I can't, I don't have a picture. I don't have any. But
it's subjective and personal.
Yeah, my personal experience in dealing that one-on-one. There was uploads going on, or information, which was kind of unsettling. Because in one experience, and it still kind of creeps me out going back to it right now, but they suddenly took me out of the woodland, not physically, but like I was suddenly coming out my mind or something. And we're flying over an ocean, and it's the Earth, but not our Earth, it's a parallel Earth. And we're in some kind of a vehicle, and it's happening while I'm standing in the woods staring at this mantid.
Like parallel timeline?
And so it's like happening. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go ahead, finish, man. He'll ask afterwards.
So I mean, then all of a sudden I'm in some freakish parallel Earth where there are giant humans, like 15, 20 feet tall. They're horrible. They're not very nice. It's a human civilization, but they're very they're at the same level of technology we are, but they were very, it's scary. They were I don't know how to describe it. Brutal is what but they were dinosaurs on the Earth at that time. Not a whole bunch of them. What they were telling me was, it's like saying, here's an example of where we go. This is a parallel Earth where some of the dinosaurs survived. And they were saying humans evolved this size to compete with them. And they were very savage. They had a technology, but there was something very frightening about them. And I didn't like that experience. I was like, oh dear, So I went back. It's like getting back into my head, and I was still standing there, and I was like, this is where you guys go. You go into other realities. It's not just the dimensions, it's parallel realities.
Parallel timelines.
Yeah. And I'm still exploring what that means, or why they're exploring that, or what this timeline means to them. It's kind of like they're saying, we're nicer to deal with.
Well, there should be an infinite number of timelines out there.
Yeah. I guess in some respects they were telling me perhaps those types of humans that they had created didn't quite go the way that they had wanted them to go, which was where, believe it or not, this is a peaceful civilization. We do have a lot of issues with conflict.
But relatively speaking,
there are parallel. I'm sorry?
Relatively speaking?
I would say, yeah, relatively on this planet and this reality, but it's not as bad as other Earths, other parallel realities where the human race evolved into something much more savage and frightening. But again, there's so much area to cover in this. I mean, the Solar Warden program, then there's the Reptilian Contactees, and I do want to mention there are kind but compassionate reptilian beings engaging the human race. It's not one that's bad, and that's it. There's loads that are very, very kind. And I want to just for a minute, acknowledge those experiences and the people that have had those experiences. Probably getting a very poor press, and they're trying to get their movement going. And I don't want to put a knock against it, but they're trying to get that. I've got some friends in that area that are saying, look, a lot of reptilians have got really bad press, over the years, and Hollywood doesn't help any with a lot of what it puts out there. Though I respect the work producers put out for entertainment, there's good beings. The Solar Warden contingency comprises not just Sasani. I want to also point out there are kind reptilian beings in this. Think of it as something like a federation. There's Zetas, there's mantids in this. There's a whole fifth column of faction that has emerged in this. Hold on a minute. There's other areas I wanted to cover with you guys.
That's great, man. Look, we need to just jump to a quick break real quick. So if you want to stretch your legs and maybe gather your thoughts for round two.
Yeah.
And, if you don't mind, I'd like to open up the phone and see if maybe we get a couple callers, maybe with some questions for you or something. If that's okay
cool
with you.
And, while
it's hit or miss. We may get one, we may not. We'll see what happens. But we'll be back shortly, guys, and thanks for watching. And thanks again, Jason. We'll see you in a few.
Be right back. Why doesn't the button make the thing work?
Why come no thing?
Could have Villainous animals will distort you and twist you and misrepresent you. Your elegant innocence has transformed you into a definite target of manipulations and greedy ravagings of launder your purity, spoil your seed, shadow you under scrutiny, or hide you entirely from consensus reality. Veritas, one and only. Veritas, our own. Veritas. Seeking her endlessly, she's ever elusive. Further and further now, your source gets diluted, and the well is always deeper. How deep can you dive? How deep is your need to stare the truth in the eye? The truth is that you hide from her. You are vulnerable as you lied to yourself. Pitiable as you do. Veritas, one and only. Veritas, our own. Veritas, we will find you. We will know you. We will own you. Veritas. Control you. We will keep you hidden well. In the streaming rain of the old domain.
Hey guys, we're back.
We are
You guys ready for round 2? Hour 2 of the reality brief. So, you know, if you like what you see, you can check us out. We got many different outlets for you to check us out on. You know, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, the whole 9 yards. You guys join our Facebook group. It's great. We post all kinds of stuff in there. But, you know, that's...
And again, if for some reason you can't see us on Facebook, check out the YouTube link.
Or you know, it's also should be going out on Twitch, Daily Motion, all kinds of stuff. Just check it out. So, I guess we'll go ahead and bring our guest Jason back in. Let me. There you go. Hey, Jason, you there?
Hello.
Hey, man.
I'm here. Hello, gentlemen. Yes.
Did you enjoy the break? Get a little stretch out.
Yeah. Leg went to sleep.
Yeah. Do.
After sitting one.
Yeah, it'll happen, man.
Yeah.
So, do a little shrimp parlor trick for everybody.
Yeah. Kind of stand up and stretch about. And, But yeah, I enjoy talking to you guys. It's my pleasure, my honor, and it's so good to share and get it out there. And it is an equal process for me. I don't envision this becoming the one guy people have to listen to. I feel that we're all in it together.
Mm-hmm.
We're all sharing equally. We all have something to say. But I think we all validate each other.
Mm-hmm. The way I kind of look at it is, everybody has their own little piece, and it's up to you to do your due diligence and try to figure out how they all fit together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're honored to have a chance to give people who've survived experiences like this a platform.
Yeah.
Because whatever's going on, it needs to come to light. The public needs to know.
And I for one am not willing to discount something just because it sounds batshit crazy. I mean, I'm not going to do it. I mean, because I've seen batshit crazy with my own eyes, and
Oh wow, okay.
So, yes.
But thank you. Thank you for that. It's refreshing to be able to speak openly without, So I have encountered that in the past.
I'm sure.
You people who, I do agree with veteran researchers who say it's a very, dare I say, a very antisocial subject. You don't gain a girlfriend in this subject. You don't get popular. You don't. You're not going to become a millionaire.
Right.
You're not going to sell like millions of books. You're not going to be
absolutely
very popular with people back home. Here in England, I work in a company. I don't want to disclose the name of the company because I have some books out, but I also have a job.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some colleagues that have kind of browsed across my Facebook page, and it raises eyebrows, and they kind of, what the hell is he into? What is this about? And I'm like, being a professional, I don't mix it on my wall because then it looks like that company's endorsing Jason Moss or JP
right.
Moss because that's my pen name, JP Moss. So, I'm a professional. I don't mix it up. I don't try to steal endorsements or things
mm-hmm.
like that. But I welcome other experiencers to come along, join along, come into this, come in with me. We'll be friends. Let's all hang out. I mean, that's what it's all about. Is it's not just the sharing with extraterrestrial civilizations. It's the sharing with each other on this planet. And in this level, this new level, and it's sharing with you, gentlemen.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're experiencer or not experiencer, or researcher, I don't think what I don't like about the term experiencer is that it kind of sets us aside as being a bit exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
No, we're over here. We're about we're experiencers. We're first class seating, and everyone else go to the second. I don't like that. I like. Yes, it's a term. It is what we are. But I think researchers are just as equal, and everybody else just, maybe we have another term for that, observers, or just people that kind of watch us all and think, well, okay, and I'll even include in that category skeptics. I can't, don't want to put that out of focus. Skeptics, yes, you're welcome. Please come on my Facebook page. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I have no issue with that. I welcome skeptics. I welcome that. Some people may say it's just a mental illness. Think what you want. I don't care. If people want to say that Benita doesn't exist and she's all some fabrication of my mind, then by all means, you can believe that. That's fine. I'm not offended. That's cool. Believe what you want to believe. That's your opinion. I tell people.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay with me. What I don't like to do is, like, especially with the photographic evidence, is share it blatantly, publicly like that. There are some private groups I'm involved with where the photos are primarily sitting. I have a few on my main page on Facebook,
mm-hmm.
But I don't want to scare people. If I see people getting nervous or unsettled with it, because I have some of the photos downloaded onto paper, they've been copied onto paper,
right.
Hard copy. Sometimes in certain circles, I'm very cautious about that. Someone may get upset or nervous, I'll pull the photos back. And if they say, those are just trees, that's light aberration, I don't argue with them. I say, okay, that's what it is then. And they'll say, Solar Wardens is insane, it's something you made up. I'll say, okay, whatever, that's fine. Okay. I'm not going to say, well, yes, that's right. Because I know from my experience what's going on and what's right, my truth about that. So I don't want to, push this into people like that. Now, that's something that Benita raised with me about that in our initial contact in the early 90s. And I asked her that, why aren't you talking to, I told her then I was 20, and I says, I shouldn't be having this experience. I said, I can think of someone like Carl Sagan should have this experience.
Right. We were just talking about him earlier, weren't we, Dan?
Oh, well. Well, I brought that up to her. I said, I grew up watching that man. I loved his shows. Thought he was a very sensitive, very.
I'm with scientist. You, sir. Uncle Carl was the man, regardless of what other folks may think. I'm a big fan.
I may have been a little bit mean to Uncle Carl.
Oh dear! Oh no, not Uncle Carl.
I think it was an attempted Jimmy rustling that fizzled, but
yeah,
it's all right. But I mean, Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you talked a little bit earlier about the channeling, and you sent me an audio clip earlier, and this is an uncommon way. Most of the people channeling ET or claiming to be channeling ET intelligences or whatever, are doing it through their vessel as themselves. But what you've sent me, do you want to explain the process behind that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So along the last years, since 2010, I was feeling called. Benita was calling me in different directions. She's very ingenious. She's very clever. Because while many people I have channeled as well like that from my own self. From what she has spoke through me. Mm-hmm. There's kind of like this pressing need for evidence. Is what seems to be a bit of a priority in where we're concerned and all this, where I'm concerned.
Right.
There's kind of like there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of people involved in this, but there's something in the statement, something in the message, something about our experience in the early 90s and how she was treated that needs to be out there. So she says, "Look, I'm gonna help you with that evidence." And I'm like, "Well, how are you gonna do that?" So she uses the technology here on Earth that is available to me, and she
Jason, we lost you.
To what's called a PSP-7. I'm here.
Yeah, we lost you. You said
faded out for a split
last
second.
thing we got was she uses the technology that was available here to you on Earth.
Yes. Okay. All right. Hello. Testing. Can you hear me?
Yeah. We got you, man.
Okay. Sorry.
You're back.
All right. Yeah. So she calls me to the technology here on Earth, and she says, go to the PSP-7 Spirit Box, or what's known as Frank's Box, invented by the late Frank Sumption. He passed away a few years ago, sadly. It is a device, which is an FM/AM device. I went to that technology. And along this path, she's calling me to a lot of different areas here, on Earth of stuff that is readily available. With the contract, where in other words she can't drop some hard evidence of a radio of her own device in front of me. She's calling me to this stuff, which is quite ingenious. It's like a shortcut. It's getting around it rather than me sitting here just channeling something. She says, "Here, I'll speak through that radio." So I began calling out to her, and there she was. I heard the voice. It was the voice I heard in the early 90s. Now, I want to make this clear to the callers so that they don't get confused. She is not a dead girl or a deceased person, though the technology is used for speaking to the dead. We are dealing with a civilization that has a technology that can transcend into higher dimensions. It is a technology that would seem almost like magic to us. It is so advanced. Not just phase out of sight from us where we don't see them, only come up in infrared pictures like in the woods. That's child's play. That's nothing. That's nothing. That little bit of cloak trick in the woods is nothing. They can go into higher dimensions with the technology. And
But
could be someone trying to subvert it. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
It's very possible.
Hey, stranger things, man. Yeah. But I do have a clip here. It's about 47 seconds long. If you don't mind if I play that for you. This is Contact with Benita.
Please.
All right.
I open this session with love and light.
Identifying her as mother like that publicly was because I was going through an avalanche of problems with some experiencers, especially female experiencers, who took this as, I didn't realize how this was looking to the public. There was this surface of this middle-aged guy and a little hybrid girl, and they were taking that as something rather unusual or a bit like, something off or not quite right. It didn't look right to them, because I began posting all these pictures on my wall of paintings of hybrid beings, of females, which often depict what looked like some could interpret as looking childlike. So some were suggesting that perhaps this was some kind of an ego issue, or that I had invented her, and that this was about some girlfriend or galactic girlfriend or whatever. So I was like, there really needs to be some dignity put forward here and a clarification. So, I felt that was appropriate, saying mother, because of the fact that I have apparently allegedly her DNA, some of it within me, and she comes before me, before I was born. She's older than me, so it just in later sessions, I didn't really. There wasn't any further references to her being a mother, but it was at the time to kind of put a little bit of a boundary there. In other words, to say let's put some dignity to this and some respect, and know that this isn't me trying to run around the media saying this is my girlfriend, an ET hybrid.
Well, actually,
yes, we share a room together. No.
I had a question for you. Do you think that maybe, as your contact with her progresses and, as your experiences develop, if she might be at some point willing to give you maybe a sigil or something, some kind of symbol that somebody who was psychically or magically gifted could, tap into those energies and reach out to her or somebody, somebody of her stature through the astral plane?
Yep, I understand you correctly. Like
some sort of anchor that somebody could, use to tap into her waveform.
And then kind of like it'd be another form of validation, kind of like an unknown person to me that has skilled in remote viewing or psychic skills, who then something that I know, and then they say, "Yep, okay," and it comes back and forth. That's easy. Yeah, no problem with that.
That'd be really cool.
And I do want to remind you guys out there listening, watching, whatever you're doing, if you got a question for Jason, you want to get in on the conversation, that number is 757-528-8130. Right up there on the screen for you. Calling on in with the questions. All right, sorry, man. I had to do that, though.
Every once in a while.
So, now, you sent me these pictures earlier, and there was one in there was a Facebook screen capture. Did you have a particular story behind that one, or was it did you send that one to me accidentally? It's about let's see, it's about a wildfire.
Is it about? Yeah, about the channelings. Yes, this is where it's validation to the fact that I'm channeling her and that she's speaking through me. So we have Facebook is brilliant about time date stamping that cannot be, as far as I know, cannot be altered or hacked in any way. So it's a beautiful way to create some good, solid, grounded evidence. Okay, so like if you put a post on Facebook, it has a day and time it was put out there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use it as reference and come back to it. And then, of course, I said this here, and then someone can say, did you? Yes. And then they can come back and get a JPEG photo of it. There it is. It was said there. Now, when I channeled Benita recently, there's a date time stamp on that channeling of events that were yet to happen. And these are concerning the hurricanes that have hit. This is concerning the earthquake that hit Mexico, the fires in California. So you can see the time of the channeling is coming prior to the events. Now, what I did was I then superimposed the news headlines of days and weeks after the channeling over the channeling, so you can see the date I'm over that, and then you see that yes, this is confirming something, especially the earthquake in Mexico, where the channeling, she was saying this was an earthquake in an unknown location, in a location people wouldn't expect, and it was going to be, there it was. Within a week's time, you can see the date time stamp. There it is. There's this news headline. There's an earthquake that hit Mexico. What's important is not just that that was correct, it's why these events are happening. Now, we're entering into an area that gets a little, this is where it gets a little bit strange for some folks, a little bit bad. And it's kind of like, well, I said earlier there's no alien invasion, but then, we're also talking about a civilization of people who see themselves as human beings and love the human race and see family on this planet. I want to make that point clear, first of all. So they are fully aware of many of the experiencers here on Earth being ostracized, harmed, beaten, or tortured by members of the government, by other institutions, framed for crimes they didn't commit. I have an opinion about a certain case going on right now. I won't say names, but I feel the gentleman is innocent of all crimes. He's a well-known experiencer. I'm not going to drop names in this broadcast, but I don't think he's guilty.
I think everybody probably knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, I
think I got a good idea.
Yeah, I hope they do. I care about this family. I do, and I feel absolutely awful for them. I really do, without naming names. But I do. I personally, I have been told, because I asked her about this connection with Benita. It is what's going on here. I don't doubt these people or their credibility, but what's going on? And she's, my personal experience is she's saying, yeah, this is someone who's literally been framed up. And that shocked. It's not that it shocked. I mean, it's shocking to know how far the institutions will go to hurt people. How far they will go. What material will they get a hold of and put within people's possession to hurt them, to get them in trouble, to destroy them. It's like, wait a minute. You're America. You're the American government, and you're getting a hold of that material. Well, that makes you as guilty as anything right there.
Right.
That becomes an accessory in itself. And then you go and put it in you spread that into innocent people's lives. Well, I don't want to go into that any further. But just know that they're aware of many people who are lesser known going through torment and torture with, all kinds of forces out there trying to stop them. So if you read in the channels, she's saying, okay, the Sasani civilization are in fact capable of producing mass weather effects and earthquakes and things of that nature, and that they have Are they the cause of these events? Are they the direct responsible for the events? I'm not really sure about that. That's walking on thin ice. That's like saying, well, yeah, exactly. I don't want people to shoot the messenger. You know what I'm saying? There was a part of me that didn't want to put these channels out there.
Right.
I thought, I don't do everything that I feel she tells me to do. If she says go jump off a cliff, I won't go do it. I mean, I'm not going to do that, Benito. I had the channels. I channeled what she told me. I had it there. I typed it all out, and I was sitting there thinking, what are you wanting me to say to these people? You're causing mass disasters? What the hell is going on here? For what purpose? This could get me into trouble, Benito. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? But it's like the message was, clearly they're aware of the troubles that people on Earth are suffering with, and especially the experiencers that they love and care for as family, and they don't want that to happen anymore. They don't want the experiencers harmed anymore. Now, again, this goes to the disclosure event. This goes to the point where, at one point, they're going to be made they're going to be out in the public. There's going to be the final end to the contracts. The contracts are going to finally be dissolved, where they agreed no contact on Earth in any way at all. And again, I don't want to be a prophet of doom. The doom prophets. You run across that out there. Doom prophet people.
Mm-hmm.
They get it. The disasters. They just keep getting them right. And it's like.
Yeah. Well, the world just ended last weekend. I don't know if you noticed.
Yeah. I heard about that. Apparently, we're all. It ended. We're not.
We're in an alternate timeline created by CERN.
Well, yeah. No, I certainly don't get anything like that from her or from them, that there's any kind of a world ending, but there is a change in the civilization on the horizon. There's a change in a lot of things coming. Like I said before early in the broadcast, we'll still have grocery stores and a Disneyland and, get to do all the things you do, go to work, but there will be a change. It's a needed change. It has to happen.
Well, I hope
the Sassani see themselves. Go ahead.
If it's all for, I'm all for decentralizing just about everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not gonna happen.
That's okay.
I think that's the kind of needed change, though. Like, I was having a talk with somebody about this last week about, like how vulnerable the U.S.'s power grid is. And the obvious solution to that is, generating your own power off natural gas, or even distributed, very small, like neighborhood thorium salt reactors, so there's no grid to take out.
Oh wow!
Thorium salt reactors.
That would work.
They're a lot less
scary.
You
are such a mad scientist, guy.
They're a lot less scary sounding than they sound.
That's cool, though. That's pretty cool. The Sassani see themselves as members of the human race, and I know that's kind of hard for people to accept by the way they look or where they have a pretty awesome technology at their fingertips, especially this faction of them that have remained. And now I want to get into about that just quickly, that in recent times, I think back in 2012, 2013, Bashar was speaking through Derilenka, and he was saying they're going to be ascending to a higher plane, and they're going to be known as the Eshikani Sassani, or Eshikani. And that was it. Everybody was like, well, they'll only be coming through Daryl and maybe a few others, but they're gone. There they went. And other dimensions and Back to the Future, wherever they went. But during that time, there were things unfolding. In October 2012, I was in a Skype call with a gentleman who's a researcher. I won't mention names here, but it was in a Facebook group. I have the evidence of it in a Facebook group of a channeling, where in early October 2012, Benito spoke through me about a great disaster hitting New York City. It was going to be what would be seen as a natural disaster. 3 weeks later, a hurricane hit New York City.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Okay, well, I have a channeling in a Facebook group that is date time stamped to when she told me this was going to be coming.
Oh, I just want to squeeze that kitty. I just want to squeeze that kitty.
Yeah, I know.
I love you, kitty cat.
This is my cat, Rascal.
I love you, kitty cat.
He's a good boy. I just have to let him out here. Hold on a minute.
My cat likes to get on the show, too.
Yeah, I think Rascal wanted to say hello, so that was Rascal.
Hey, Rascal. Hey, buddy.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, she was again making the point at the time. Again, this is a bit touchy for listeners, and I get uncomfortable saying this sort of thing, that they're sending a message, which was that we love the experiencers, we care about them, and we want the way they're being treated to be stopped. We see ourselves as human beings. We're a part of this world too. When I mean they love people here, they love the human race, this is not with conditions to it. We're talking about a civilization that has this issue with unconditional love, compassion.
No matter how banal our culture gets.
Yeah, and so but I step back from that for a minute and I think, okay, Beniko, and I say to her, okay, but if people are getting hurt, what's going on with this? And I'm like, what in the world? The channels don't get specific to say we're going to make that happen. It's just like they're saying, if you ever seen the movie The Abyss,
yeah,
1989, James Cameron, it was like they sent a message. The aliens sent a big giant tidal wave to say, don't hurt yourselves anymore. This is kind of like the tidal wave coming and actually hitting things in this sense. And I'm like, okay, knock that off, Beniko. You're going to get me in trouble. I don't want to keep channeling this because I love her dearly, but it's we have two different. We're of the same soul, but we have two different mindsets,
individuals.
About things. When I talk about compassion and their civilization, I want to kind of give some connection to something, if I may, real quick. I have it here with me. Just quickly, we'll go into Buddhists and Tibet. If you're going to think, what in the world? Okay.
No, I'm with you, man.
Okay. You're a long way from what in the world.
There is a book called The Story of Tibet. I'm going to plug someone else's book here. Listen to this. What kind of author am I, right?
How dare you? What about your money?
Any of my books, what am I doing?
Yeah, what about your money? I put your cover up on one of them.
Oh, thank you. It's called The Story of Tibet, Conversations with the Dalai Lama, Thomas Laird. And he was a brilliant author. He spent 6 years writing this book. And as a researcher to validate things for our listeners, I have a passage here. The Dalai Lama, the 14th incarnate, the Dalai Lama, is speaking about the history of the Tibetan people and their mythology, which he takes as a fact. Okay. And if I just kind of throw this passage out just quickly, he says, okay, the author says, while the Dalai Lama relies on archaeological findings when discussing his country's origins, he believes that a particular group might have appeared under mysterious circumstances in eastern Tibet about 2,000 years ago, after the birth of the Buddha, and that their arrival may have helped to spark the creation myth of the monkey and the demoness, because they believe a demoness changed monkeys into people. We spoke about his beliefs on 2 occasions on February and May 1998. And the Dalai Lama says here, I believe that some children emerged without a father in one valley in eastern Tibet, the Dalai Lama said. A special group emerged, not the entire Tibetan population, but some group came from that valley, from some sort of semi-god. I do not mean a creator god, since Buddhists do not believe in that. But according to Buddhism, there can be a specially blessed person, a manifestation of Chenrezig that I believe. And he says, the author says, you were saying that the compassion that came from Chenrezig as a special gift to the Tibetan people, that this is real, I asked. And the Dalai Lama says, yes, that's right. This is real. It's not necessary to believe that the entire Tibetan population came from this small group that the myth talks about. Though that special group, I believe, is real, the Tibetan population has been here for more than 10,000 years, but then after Buddha's time, I think about 2,000 years ago, more in some valley, a special people emerged.
I was going to say, I wonder if there's any connection to the Dropa people.
Yeah, that's where this is heading. That the hybrids have been here for thousands of years. The fact that they are made the way they are, and the DNA they have, it allows them to be very transdimensional. And their containers, their bodies, have souls in them that allow them to transverse these higher realities. So this is their primary purpose at the end of the day. And so the Chenrezi, or these are the love children. This is Tibetan languages. Forgive me, I don't speak Tibetan. Or Latrog, as the Dalai Lama refers to them as, God children, the children from the stars. We're hearing in his passages about the early abductees and mothers giving birth to these children in Tibet. So I make a connection to when I say they're very compassionate and loving. That is in that category, about where the Dalai Lama speaks of compassion and love. Now, again, people say, but why would they deliberately hurt anybody? Why would they go about causing a disaster of some kind? Well, again, the Dalai Lama himself has talked about, about issues of being completely pacifist and issues of defending oneself. And even in his own words, he has said that one can't be a complete, non-aggressive and do absolutely nothing. This loved ones in danger. He said even the Tibetan monks were armed when the Chinese overtook it in the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard the Dalai Lama said if someone were to pick up a gun and shoot at you, it would be reasonable to return fire with your own gun.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this is kind of in that sense with what the channels are coming through, with what she's coming through me and saying. And again, the whole reincarnation and moving from one body to the next, this all originates from that civilization. It all comes out of an inspiration and contact with those special children that emerged around the time of Buddha. So in a sense, I guess if some callers or listeners would like to, if you say, well, can you give me some background or culture of the Sasani, what would really be something that I could really sink my teeth into? I'm not trying to push a religion here, but at the end of the day, I would have to put them towards in that direction of Buddhism. I'd have to say you'd have to go that direction. It's kind of a mix of Hinduism and Buddhism is where we're heading. Because some people have asked me about that. Give us the essence of the culture of what this race is like. And I'm like, well, it's already here. And again, I'm going to quote Carl Sagan again. If there's any extraterrestrials that are out there, ever visited, they would have visited here long ago. That you can look that up. He said that they would have already been here. Well, there's your evidence. I mean, here we have 20th century countless abduction cases, which sign exactly to what this passage from the 14th incarnate, the Dalai Lama, is saying. And again, people have talked about their compassion, their love that they feel from them. Yeah, it's the same thing. There it is. And here we go from moving from one body to the next, from one container to the next. Again, who is the 14th incarnate, the Dalai Lama? Well, there you go. He's 14 times. He's moved from one body to the next. It's out of love. It's not out of malice. And it's a destructive message. It's a destructive message to them when the ones they love on Earth are being harmed in this way. They're seeing what's going on down here. They're watching this. Try to be in their position is what I say to people. Put yourself in their place. They honestly look upon this as family here and loved ones, and they're not sitting back going, we're indifferent to that pain and suffering. Oh no, quite the opposite. They're very interactive on it. People say, well, what right do they have? Well, every right they've got. They see themselves as human beings too. They just haven't got a country on Earth we can point to and say that's this country over here, and then we'll make them a part of the UN. Well, that will happen one day. Yeah. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if they get called down at some point in the future for messages and actions that have taken place in the past and said, look, you really can't be doing things like that. There's a constructive way to get the message across. There's a right and a wrong here. I'm not saying they're perfect. Another thing I want to say quickly is they're not divine. There's another big issue. People have said to me, why would a divine being talk to you, Jason Moss? And I says, well, first, stop right there. These are not divine beings. These are not angels. These are not deities or gods. This is not the case.
They're natural beings like we are.
What?
He said they're natural beings like we are.
Yeah, exactly. She pointed out to me some warnings about that. She said there are those in her civilization that have committed crime, that are capable of corruption. And you'd think, well, that's mind-boggling. How's that possible with a telepathic race of such compassion? She said that that does happen. And she said so that there was a bit of a warning she was kind of coming across with. Not that they're going to come down and cause any, that this is going to be a major issue. But she said that they have all the same troubles that the human race down here has. And they have the same wants and desires, the same needs, to take care of those who they love, aspire to achieve their goals, to lead happy lives and things of that nature. But we'll probably see more of these events happen in the future with tag messages, channelings that seem to come mysteriously weeks before they take place, which will be interpreted by the world as natural events. So this is a natural event. This is a natural event until somebody out there gets the message. Leave the experiencers alone. Stop doing this to them. So rather than just some passive message of peace, love, unity, and all like that, and thank you very much for listening. Bye, everybody. A very easy thing to say, a very safe thing to say, I might add.
Very true.
Yeah, a very safe thing to say, Jason. I'm not to say to myself, very safe thing to say. Let's focus on the intention, not the action. The intention being out of love and compassion, and saying, we don't want to take over your planet. We don't want your troubles. We're not here to do that. We're here to say, look, we're here. We love these people. They have they're meaningful. They have a purpose to us. We see them as one of us, and we see ourselves as one of you. But again, I have to stress, like I said early in our broadcast over an hour ago, the human race they acknowledge has a higher developed emotional sense than what they have in the sense of, I would say, emotional maturity. Because this is a lot of them are quite new to this whole, we have feelings and here we are. So understand, of course, with a very advanced civilization, very advanced technology, I'm taking you right into the mindset of the Sasani at this point. You're going right into, you're sitting in the craft, looking out the window with them at this point. If you were to meet them face to face, this is what you'd be getting. A very playful, childlike, adult being, that has at their fingertips a pretty awesome technology with a lot of love in their heart for everybody, and a compassion for everybody, and especially the ones that they feel their family with. So imagine you're sitting back and you've got that kind of mindset and those kinds of maybe underdeveloped emotional maturity issues going on. What are you going to do when you see people on Earth, like an unmentioned family, for example, without mentioning names, getting hurt, getting beat up, getting things thrown at their heads, and being accused of things? I mean, what would you do? Well, yeah, you take action.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, the Solar Warden initiative isn't so much about, it's a two-edged sword. It's not just what goes on to try to protect the Earth from what, coming down here to the planet. It's also what goes domestically on the planet.
I had a question for you about that too. There was something that I was watching recently from the Secret Space Program channel on YouTube. It was a gentleman. His name evades me right now, but he was talking about Solar Warden, or about the Solar Warden program. And he mentioned something along the lines of humanity having an empire in ages past. You'd mentioned how there had been these huge conflagrations and conflicts here on Earth. He said that at some point in the past, humanity had built an empire and stretched out over the stars and kind of got too big for its britches and got beaten back to Earth. And he mentioned the existence of a cosmic Versailles Treaty of sorts. And I was wondering if you might have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, exactly. Again, this goes back to there are many contracts that are very old. Many people today don't even know they exist. Many governments don't know they exist. These older civilizations are still holding to those contracts, and some of them do stipulate issues of contact and no contact, etc. When we speak of humanity of old, there are different rises and falls with human history along this timeline. But then we have the pre-human. This is kind of hard to explain. We'll call it first Earth Age human. And why? Well, with an ancient race like the Mantids, the first thing that they discovered billions of years ago is they were very much alone. There wasn't really a lot of intelligent life out there, is what they discovered. It was very cold, very quiet. And when they got advanced enough, they got old enough, they started saying, look, we're going to stop propagating ourselves and start propagating into other
species,
other worlds. Yeah, other species.
We talk a lot about how there's a lot of disclosure that gets dribbled out through mainstream media, through sci-fi, and I remember there being an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation that was just like this. It was called The Chase. And the Federation, the Klingons, the Cardassians, and the Romulans were all trying to find this one piece of a star chart, right? And they finally get to it, and it turns out it's the Founders. They look just like the shape-shifty people from Deep Space Nine. And they're like, hey, we were the first, and we, went through the stars looking for people like us, and we couldn't find anyone. So we left bits of our genetic code scattered across the galaxy in the hopes that, here where you stand billions of years later, you would all find each other.
Which is, exactly. It is like they drip feed into sci-fi. And another reason that they do that, and I don't want to sound like a conspiracy too much on that, but another reason that they put it into science fiction is so another reason they hide it in science fiction, just like in the show Stargate, is so that if someone references an experience, someone can always say, yeah, but you saw that on TV.
Wormhole Extreme, baby.
Oldest, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a big piece. I mean, I've heard people say that before. You just saw that on TV.
Yeah. Well, and they were saying that to people back in the 1950s and 60s when they were talking about their experiences then. There were people that tried to come out and say, look, there's been some kind of treaty signed in 1953 with these little beings with big eyes, and that got silenced quickly when people said, no, you got that from men from Mars or whatnot, and it started. It's a very effective tool of covering something up, is put it in plain sight. It's very, very effective. It's a very effective way of discrediting experiencers. This is something that Benita knows well. They all know well about. So they're always reaching for the technological means, like photographs or other devices, to create and to kind of propagate some evidence at this point. But again, the contracts are overwatched by these elder races, and they're very, very strict about that. So, again, we're in a time where the contracts are ending, coming apart, dissolving. There's going to be, mainly because what goes on here on Earth, the governments on Earth are going to violate the wording of the contracts. They're going to break them. Shouldn't surprise listeners. There are many, many contracts violated with Native Americans in the Old West. There were tons of treaties that were signed and broken over and over again.
It's kind of what governments do.
Yeah, and that is it's a natural course of events. It's going to happen. They're coming. It's going to happen. I don't want to scare listeners about the future. I try to sway away from being a doom prophet guy, but pay attention to recent events in the media, but don't be frightened in what happens. Don't be scared. It's not the end of the world. It's a beginning of another world. It's a new beginning.
And everyone's so quick to call for revolutions, but what I really want to see is a renaissance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Renaissance. Time of sharing and exploring, and yeah, absolutely.
I've got a question for you, and I'm sorry if you touched on this and I just missed it, but is Benita still in custody?
No, she's not. Now, if David Chase were sitting on the call here, he would probably have already pointed this out. It's in a short book I wrote called Benita of the Sasani by J.P. Moss. It's a novella. So it's written in for like a younger audience, because I wanted to reach the new generation. So it's not like a big, thick... I think a lot of people get put off by real thick novels,
Right.
First thing you do when you go to the UFO, you want to check out a book on UFOs, and you see this big 400-page book. Younger audiences will just go, "Yuck! I ain't got time for that." Okay, put that down.
That's not on YouTube.
Yeah.
Why are you reading them words?
Dude, what's this? It's an abridged version of my experience of 1992 with her and some of the stuff she told me. Now, in the book, it outlines what I'm going to say. It's going to sound, again, it goes into that area of, well, that just stretches believability. It's like Jason, you bend believability at this point. You know what in the world? Some of the experiences I left out an hour ago of that night, I deliberately left out because, again, it was like David was telling me in the beginning. You remember it, there it is. You need to just put it out there. Go that direction. Just put it out there. And I was like, yeah, but David, this is like, my God, are you serious? This is off the wall. I don't remember how the night ends, but I remember the night in two ways, which him and a few other researchers were kind of referring to a bit of a something like a paradoxical memory, or a time memory, if you will, or time paradoxical memory. There's one memory where she's being hurt and she's being harmed, and I'm witnessing this. As I said, I was crying and I was upset. There seems to be some suggestion that I went to try to save her or pull them off her, and I was injured myself. The second memory is along that same night, where just at the moment they're about to pull her away from me and start to hurt her, somebody screams. One of the soldiers is a female, screams, and then someone says, "Sir, they're in the area." They all get very still, very calm. They're all very frightened, and then a triangular craft, I recall, flies over my courtyard. And all of a sudden someone yells something, and a man appears at the center of the courtyard where this commander was standing. He was surrounded by people, his people. He wasn't near me. I was standing next to that sergeant lady, that blonde sergeant lady. And a man appears. And he's a middle-aged guy. He's wearing glasses. He's got a hat. And it's like he's trying to negotiate for Benico's release. Now, it wasn't any kind of an alien that hopped out of that triangular craft. And at first glance across the courtyard, I was 20 years old. In this memory, I don't take any notice of who the man is. I'm not really sure what's going on. Until I start to get a good look at him, I begin to get real scared.
Do you remember what kind of uniform he was wearing?
I'm sorry?
Was he wearing a uniform of any kind?
He was. He was wearing something similar to what she was wearing, which was kind of like a dark outfit with a blue triangle. If it's on me, it would be my left-hand side of my upper part of my chest with a circle around it. It looks like like the civil defense symbol in America. Is what it looked like. He was in that, and this commander was like shouting at him, "You come here wearing that uniform and expect me to cooperate with you." Somebody then says, "Well, we can't do anything to him. We can do this to you." And he puts a gun to his head. Well, I began to look at him, and as I recall, he looks like me. And then I became very, very, very uncomfortable at this point. A lot of anxiety as I began to realize I'm looking at myself from some future timeline. This is me. And the woman standing next to me was, although you could tell she was a seasoned soldier. She was a very tough woman. She was visibly frightened. And this commander was like, "What's going on, Sergeant?" And she says, "Sir, we're in a paradox." We're in some kind of a paradox where apparently Benico did not survive that night. And I don't think I did either originally. So talking it through with David, yeah, it's quite extraordinary. Talking it through with David, we put the pieces together, and it was very clear what was emerging. And David then was very helpful. He was pointing out that Whitley Strieber had spoke of time travel experiences where he saw his older self. I didn't know that at the time, and David was pointing that out to me.
Well, that was
a lot of comfort. I'm sorry?
That ties in with a question I've been kind of wanting to ask you for the last few minutes. Another one of our guests not too long ago mentioned that things would be happening in the near future that would throw into question our perception of time and the way that we experience time. He said that time would become more non-linear as humanity began to evolve into a higher density, and I was just wondering if you might have any insight on that, about time
absolutely.
becoming more cyclical or less linear.
Yeah, because in actuality, there are no paradoxes. Timelines merge, everything merges. And overall, that is correct. Yeah, I completely agree with him. We're entering into it's a different kind of an age we're entering into, along with the events in space-time that are happening around us now. It goes into a much higher level. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that the Sasani are transdimensional. They're operating with their technology. That's causing a lot of impact on this planet in a third-dimensional sense. On this planet, in fact, in this entire solar system is being affected by this. Not just the Earth, but the entire solar system and this region of space, this part of the galaxy, is all being affected by this. So it is bringing us, you could say, their compassion and love, if you will, is pulling us through into that density issue. They exist, here they are, and we're all being dragged in, kind of like a, I don't want to use the term black hole. That's not very, I don't want to say that, but we're all being moved through that. Now, matter, as Vinico's told me, is controlled by light. Quickly on that, light, the speed of light, roughly 186,000 miles a second, is kind of like the speed limit for all light in this universe, everywhere. As over the years, I've picked up information from her, having that connection with her, I pick up on some of the technology involved here. They know that light controls time. Light controls matter, it controls mass and gravity. Light is the veil of our third-dimensional reality. In fact, it's the barrier. If you break past that barrier, you're instantly in higher velocities of different kinds of light, higher, like if you want to call it tachyon, whatever, traveling faster than light. You're also in other dimensions. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Warp 11 plus.
Yeah. And so you're entering into higher dimensions. Okay, so in these higher dimensions, you have faster than light quanta particles moving about. They can manipulate that. They have total control over this through capacitances. I don't know what the technology is. What I've tried my best over the years quietly to wrap my head around some of what comes through on that. I've done the best I can with physics equations on my own to try to put into physics equations, not words, what I get from her. And basically she then guides me in another direction. And there's a gentleman called E.J. Gold, and he builds these devices called quantum crystal amulets, from the amulets into the body. Well, that's a very simplistic way of saying these are conduits for pulling in faster than light energies, if you will. It's going to be very difficult to quantify that scientifically. How do you say these are faster than light particles coming in to something like that? Well, I don't think that's personally is going to be possible to prove that. So I went out of my way, and I do not in any way will ever sell what I build. I simply built my own based on his schematics, and will never sell them to the public. Okay, they're his copyright. That's his.
Mm-hmm. I hear you.
But I built my... I'm sorry?
I hear you.
Go ahead. Okay. So I built my own, but I added a little bit of an upgrade to them. They use germanium diodes, capacitors, resistors, inductor choke coils, or what's known as the donut-shaped transformers in the schematics. And I'll send you some pictures of that in the future. My devices use much larger capacitors, much larger germanium diodes, and my sons are witnesses to what happened. Again, this is going to be impossible to quantify on camera. In 2013, the first device I built was put inside a plastic sphere. Plastic is very important because you have a capacitor. You need to build what's like a Leyden's jar, is what it is. It was covered in copper. So the device is sitting inside the sphere. It's covered in copper and plastic, and so you have this already a bit of a static charge coming off this thing. I began poking around with it, and all of a sudden, there was a light flash in my eyes, and my computer monitor had snow on it, which is unheard of to see snow on a computer monitor.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And okay, and my mobile phone in my pocket. I had my mobile phone on me. I don't remember the exact time, but it said something like 11:40 p.m. And on the computer monitor, it said 11:40. Everything was consistent in the room around me. When that flash happened, my phone was 4 minutes off everything in the house. My son claims, my teenage son was quite freaked out and said he saw something, and I wasn't in the room for a bit.
Huh.
We continued experimenting with these devices, and I found on one instance, my oldest son was not in the house. He was out. Our internet was currently off at the time. I had devices in the backyard. And I remained in it. And it's my second oldest day.
We're losing you, Jason.
5 minutes he was in the house and the internet was turned back on, and he said, "Dad," in the exact same way. So we heard.
Yeah, you're cutting out, brother.
It sounded like an awesome story, but unfortunately, we didn't get much of it. Can you hear me?
Are you there?
About what they do, and he's
Kind of there.
a lot of money. I'm not selling these. Like I said, do what? I'm sorry.
We lost you,
were cutting
man.
out.
We lost you for about
Right there?
a minute and a half there. Yeah, we were trying to get you, but
Okay.
I guess you weren't getting us.
Okay. So I mean, she called me. Just recapping, Benita called me in that direction to explore those devices, and I thought, what is this about? So she's a bit of a teacher, and she's saying these devices control light. I said, in what way? Light, visible light. But the devices, it's a circular circuit. It doesn't have a switch on or off. It's constantly on. And because it's not grounded, if any of our listeners understand technology, it's a groundless circuit. So what's happening is, as I understand it, it's constantly modulating into higher and higher frequencies all the time until it reaches a level where it's at the veil of our reality, this third dimension. We have are faster than light. Energies are faster than light, particles coming into it. Intermittently, it's dispersing those particles, which is causing issues with space-time, which is what we were observing, essentially. They're like mini time machines, if you will. It was quite distressing, that first experience. I want to point out, I was quite unnerved by that. I didn't like that. I was quite scared because who do you talk to about this? Who do you go to? I was quite shaken up by that.
Well, Jason, man, it's been great, but we're about almost a half an hour over now, so we are gonna have to call it a night. But we would love to have you back on again.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
It sounds like you got plenty more to talk about. So
I do, and I love talking to you guys. Thank you very much for having me. I do appreciate your time, and thank you to all the listeners out there for taking the time to listen to me, and then Benito's message of compassion and love. And I appreciate your company. Yes, please. I would love to come back and talk more.
it was great talking to you, man. If you want, real quick, how do we get your books? Is it on Amazon, bookstore?
I'm sorry. Sorry, say again.
How do we get your books? Amazon?
Amazon, yes, you can look up JP Moss. They're self-published. So lulu.com, that's lulu.com has me. That's JP Moss. They're out there. Some of them, there's one book called Solar Wardens, The Awakening Since 2010. It covers a lot of my personal experiences in Ipswich and a lot of what we've talked about here in this broadcast. There's a book on the PSB-7 Spirit Box. I've putting forth what, again, it's talking about light dimensions and kind of basically how this device could be used and what it's my theory of how I think the device is being used and what's happening, how we're talking to them. So it's been a big learning curve dealing with Beniko. It's not just she's there and that's it. It's like you start getting into areas of physics that people haven't got into yet. And you're like, wait a minute, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles has some of my books. They can go there. Lulu.com. I've got a Facebook page, JP Moss, Author JP Moss, and I'm on Facebook as well, Jason P. Moss, and underneath that's JP Moss.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jason. It was great talking to you, man, and I'll be in touch soon. And we'll go ahead and put your information out in our Facebook group and your pictures and all that stuff, and I'll add you to that so you can check it out.
All right, thank you. Talk to you again, guys.
All right, Jason.
Thanks for coming on. Talk to you soon. Safe travel, sir.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Well, so what'd you think of that, man? Pretty interesting, huh?
That's wow, what a story, man.
And you guys out there watching, man, I just want you to know that this dude lives in England now. So it's like 3 o'clock in the morning right now over there. He's a trooper, man.
He's a night owl,
you know,
just like us.
But so that about wraps it up for this week, and we'll be back next week. Phantom Spy will be joining us. We'll be going over just random news, exo news, spaceships, you name it, whatever.
Technology.
Maybe do a little.
Maybe a conspiracy or two.
Little decompression. We've had a lot of guests on the last couple weeks. Maybe we'll do some chatting about what we've discovered. But thanks for watching, guys. And I would like to apologize for the technical glitches, and I think I have solved it. So if you don't want to see that happen anymore, hop on over to our Patreon page.
Yes.
patreon.com/realitybrief. Maybe think about a one-time donation. Maybe think about a reoccurring donation. I don't know. It'll help us upgrade this equipment we got. So